2012 Reboot, Gods and War. Prologue. In the year of our Lord 1585 the answer to faith arrived. The King of Heaven and his angels walked upon the earth and the streets of Rome for a day. The rising and the setting of the sun and then gone from the soil of the earth. The kings of Christendom turned quickly against the heretics, England fell to the Armada and her queen burned with the rest of her country, burned back to the true faith. Though there was no peace. The new crusades destroyed Asia in an eternal war and the Americas faded into small praying towns. Technology barely moved on. Revelation of the Lord meant the revelation of the end. Alas for one day and never again. The day became a story, and a myth, and a question of faith spiraled into doubt and the cost of a 500-year Eurasian war was high. Chapter 1 The day it all changed, the Northern City, England. My name is Lee, I have no family. I lost me father to the Crusades and my mother to illness. I have returned home from the advancing and falling fronts of the Asian Saracens. I belong to the monastic regiment the White Knights and after 5 years of war I returned to find my precious England a very different place. Religious doubt and bitter war exhaustion has torn us apart. The White Knights are home to keep peace, a peace that I have never known. The day it all began was a cold wet November and I prayed to the Lord for the sun I could only hope to see on such a dark and oppressed day. I sick of sitting alone in an empty home, drinking myself to happiness and trying to forget the horror of the far-off war, its burning smells and choking black smoke. Today the air was moist and clean and I walked through the stone buildings of the northern city and looked at the fog on the river. Then a horseman came, a messenger of the knights. Lee, the old man of the knights needs you. He said, revealing his face from a hood. Stu? My friend, you look worried. It's more than just mindless riots, something is twisting the minds of the people, and the war has come to the Mediterranean. I was confused by his words and the dry-mouth fear he had in him. I followed him to the castle keep headquarters which was not far up the river. The old man of the knights, who I felt was like a father to me, we all did, appointed me as liaison to the London. I objected, for the first time I was free from a war, like a bird escaping a burning bush. He talked a tall talk about how I am like the wind and where I go all ships must follow. I looked to the cross and back to my sword. I had no choice. My friends Stu and the monk David are to come with me. We left instantly. Chapter 2 London Town. The road to London took 3 days. I stopped at the beautiful city of York and we were well hosted by the people for the night. In London we prayed at St. Paul's and arrived at Westminster Palace. I was so proud to be standing in the palace in my white uniform and the cross of St. George. The stewardess ushered us in the throne room. It was magnificent, made from gold, velvet and marble. There were things there I could not understand, materials I had never seen before. King Christian von Habsburg 13, a young charming man, twisted a scepter in his hand. Heralds were behind him with standards and a new one, a red shield. The old man of the knights deserves a fruitful retirement. So we shall give him one, and much more gold. Our loyal friend Lee, you are a true servant and England's saviour. You are to lead the White Knights in a difficult task. War is on the borders of Europe, the enemy has become strongly united, and we can no longer trust our Christian allies. I must count on you to save England from her people should they lose faith. I can only serve God and the King. I lied. I have one question before I go, what is this strange material? It's called plastic, said the King. That night in the apartments Stu and I spoke. I don't trust this friend. He is asking us to turn on our people. SHHH, did you hear that knock? Grab your sword, Stu. A young girl came in and handed me a letter that she hid under her knickers. My name is Myla and I'm here to help you. A few of us do not trust Christian. My friends are now dead, gibbeted and burned in secret. He is the messenger of Satan. The red shield is the telltale. Look, my blonde hair is fading white with fear. I don't know how long we might have left to live. The girl had a soft, shaken voice, but there was a truth in her. This letter says it is England that will attack Catholic Europe. An army from hell sail in ships with the red shield flag and are to be welcomed in Dover. he will use the White Knights to secure the country through murder, and the army of cold-blooded men will burn the world. Her hand trembled as she forced the letter to my hand. He is moving fast, the boats will be here in 1 week. I took the letter from her soft slender fingers. Thank you, but this letter is treason, I said, doubting myself. The girl needs to see that it's just not true, a myth. Like all the other gossip. Like the king is secretly a reptile or the leader of the barbarians of Siam is immortal, Sta said, although no one can remember another leader, it's like he has always been. Sta drifted. Well, I'm glad we aren't fighting in that far corner of the world. The Red Knights suffered so much, all of them torn to pieces, but anyway a holiday is in order and a small exercise in Dover will throw all this gossip in the fire. Chapter 3, Thunder in the Straits. With messengers and lies in letters to the king, I had made an excuse for 5,000 White Knights to gather in Dover and 15,000 mustered up north. 1 week and 3 days had passed and I stood in the rain on the south coast, looking at the ocean torrent and black clouds. Merchant ships struggled in the seas and a hissing wind cut through the men. Nothing, Sta said, just nothing. Look at the sea. When I was a boy I lost my sails in a storm like this, haha, and my faith as I was pulled under the freezing waves. I knew nothing could save me as the water strangled me, but somehow I awoke on the beach. It was a bad vicious storm. Like this one. I awoke near a house on a cliff. So what do you think of Mila? I don't need to, although she is so gorgeous I think I love her. If no ships come, no ships come. Mila is a beautiful girl. She has been staying with me. Somehow she knows me, knows who I am. You know who you are. You're the savior of England and heaven. Sta mocked, laughing. Or maybe just a puppet. He laughed some more, and at the time I was not impressed. The dream, that night I was asleep, the girl was with me, but I felt a chill on me, a chill as naked flesh touches cold metal. I dreamed I was under grey skies and struggling to hold on to crumbling rock, the sour rock of a steep mountain. My body was heavy. The wind hissed. Everything was washed with grey dust, somewhere the sun had set and the stars of eternity dimmed too high to reach. Almost at a ledge I clung on like a baby to its mother. Cold feet appeared on the ledge. Help me up. I pleaded to the stranger. This place is empty, its gates are shut. He replied. What can I do? Where can I go? I begged. There is a place for you, he said with a fearful voice. You must let go. I looked down to a place so deep the light of eternity could not reach. I felt the pain and agony and despair of that place. You must let go, he commanded. My fingers burned and bled. I did not want to fall. I awoke. The next evening, bored with the rest of the men, I sat in Dover Castle bouncing a ball off a wall. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Like the beat of a banging drum. Drum, drum, drum. Then a voice, Sir, the king is here. I leapt to my feet, ran down the corridor. Christian was there with at least 100 men. Most of them armed. There were his standards, and the red shield flag. He scolded me at why we all were here. Just an exercise in siege warfare, I tried to pass off casually. And a voice from the battlements screamed, warships in the straits. My eyes met with the king's, and our devious intent was known to each other. His eyes were deep and black, he had cruel tight lips, and he bore his teeth. Sta's voice could be heard, they hold a red standard and no response to semaphore. Permission to take action, sir? No one move, screamed the king. Guards, get the knights down in the keep. Do it now. Red lights streaked through the mist like lightning. Flaming cannons punished the castle. The men did not wait for orders and gave the invaders a taste of powder. I ran to the battlements, and behold! Boats had landed and scores of shadows swamped the misty beaches. Dover's battery sounded, the price of a beach is blood. Rain lashed down like the tears of a hysterical woman, and a great fire burned around the castle country and the sea. Christian and his men had vanished in the confusion, and I was at the walls fighting back the steel-armored creatures climbing with murderous intent. We fought with powder, lance and blade. Their army was immense. It was over, we were beaten. blood and broken brick were about my feet. Screams and banging cannons in the air. Dover was smashed in. She began to collapse. Rally, rally in the courtyard. Rally to me. Set the powder and rally to the courtyard. The cross of St. George pulled the men from their posts and we crowded the courtyard. Powder set for 3, a soldier called. We are breaking out, I ordered. Where is Myla? Where is Myla? I shouted. The portcullis up and our weight as a body of men forced its way in and through the enemy. I was suffocated by the squash of bodies against me. We were all on the ground. And death. Then the ringing. Stone rained down around us as we scrambled. I looked back and felt the heat on my bloody face. Dover Castle had exploded, burned, a thick tower of poison smoke rose like a twister in a storm. With our feet in the mud we ran into the night, fighting our way out of a rout, throughout the harshest night of my life. Chapter 4. Between life and death, I lay there between the sheets with Myla, her soft breasts against my skin and her love whispered in my ear. Nothing else mattered. We talked for hours and kissed. I told her of how I always dreamed of helping people. Of how I dreamed to be Doctor who had a wife as lovely as her, a girl to die for. She cuddled into me, looked me in the eye and said, wake up. It was almost 10 o'clock, and I ate what food I had, the sweet taste of a simple cold lunch. It's how I knew I was still alive. Ghosts don't eat, or drink, they know only that death is absolute. Where is she? I asked Ster, hoping for an answer I knew I wouldn't get. She is not with us, and half the men are gone. 85 are dead this morning of wounds and I bet infection will take the rest by the weekend. Did you see them, how fast they moved? They can't be too far behind. I feel helpless. Our king has sold England and his soul to Satan. What were those things? Demons, said the monk David, behind the armor and masks they may look like us, sound like us, but they are not as us. No compassion from the torturers of Tartarus. Twisted and evil. They have come to conquer this island and from here the realms of Christendom. When the beast fell from heaven he will rise to savage the earth. He will come from the sea. How could we have known that time was now? Hearing those words I looked upon the mist-laded ground and once again to the suffering of the men. With a king who has betrayed us and the devil behind us, all a man can do is fight till his breath wears thin. I rallied the men and walked the trodden road north, a pilgrimage to the house of St. Becket. There at Canterbury I can get the men food at least and with hope some solace. But we would never make it there. Chapter 5. A War on Two Fronts. We marched all night, and my carrier pigeon Speckled Jim brought me news that our English army had left London and was less than 8 miles away. The joy in the men's faces was clear at the news and I felt my spirit lifted somewhat, although the fate of Myla and the men we left behind haunts me deeply. Over an hour passed on the march and by now the yellow sun had risen over the countryside, flooding the world with light and a brightness illuminating the treetops, but has yet to reach the cold wind-swept earth. In the distance we could see the army. Stop the men, we can rest for 5, let's let them come to us. I laughed. To look at the shimmer on the spears, it's beautiful. A sight like this reminds me of our campaign in Asia. The day we invaded Persia and we were all marching out of Baghdad, so many spears. You were so ill that day, your face so red and swollen in the heat. I laughed and sat down. Sto's face was pale from the thought of that memory. Then he handed me the telescope. The red-shield flag was in my sights. That bastard flag flew alongside the king's colours. My stomach turned. Ahead and behind we were trapped. And worse, this was the National Army under a new flag and we the White Knights were the enemy of this new satanic state. My hands shook, though not from the November cold. Grab you lances, White Knights, to your lances. The enemy is upon us. Ster screamed. Then he took my arm, pulling me up. The horsemen ahead began to charge, the wave of infantry behind. Lee God has walked among us and will again. Trust in him and trust in the long years we all have fought together. Fighting for him we can't be broken. Knights, this land you stand on are your graves. Defend it. I cried. Our front row knelt and the laces were up. The horsemen bounced off our lances like the tide against the rock. Then we broke rank and set on our brothers with sword, knife and teeth. Stabbing, stabbing wildly. In a clash I was on the floor kicking my way to my feet. Blood on my face, the smell of horse stinging my nostrils, I spat the mud out my mouth and fought on. I remember stabbing 6 men in the back before I took a blow to the head. I had lost Stu and was on my knees. I cried out for his help. This was it, this is the end. I cried out. 2 men pulled me up. Come on, the White Knight said. I looked up to see the army in disarray, their infantry had fled and the blood-soaked knights struggled on. I saw the king on a pale horse surrounded by my men. The White Knight stung the king's guard like lightning. The red flag was in the mud. We were almost there. Chapter 6 Playing with the enemy. The demons overran our position. In a rush I lunged with my sword and lodged it in a demon's chest. Then I was cut and on the ground, back with the dead. The White Knights were cut down. When I awoke, in such pain, I held tight some dirty cloth to the laceration in my side. I could hardly move and I lay as a corpse would lie. The demons were still about the stench of the battlefield and foolishly I crawled to escape. From a core of a demon, I pulled its shroud over me. I looked at the horrendous face painted on its mask and slowly reached for it. Behind it I saw a face, wide-eyed, the cheeks swollen and the tongue large and protruded out of the mouth. A core in life, a core in death. I put on the mask and rose to my feet. I walked freely about their camp. Behold, I saw 199 White Knights as prisoners on their knees, encircled and in chains. Behind them carts of people, dirty trapped people in chains. They wish to be slaves but their fate is to be murdered and cannibalized for this unholy army. I wish I had not eaten their food. I isolated myself and saw that bastard King Christian drink blood from a chalice. I lay down and tried to rest. At night as they slept, I walked among them. Whispering to the White Knights I said, "Wake my brothers, your chains are cut now you are free." Then we crept through the camp. As we passed the carts the people seeing me in the robe spat on me and hissed. I crept on. Almost free. But I must look back. Eyes caught my eyes, Marla's eyes behind the bars of a cart. I looked into the night and saw a perfect silent escape but I had to go back for her. I stepped back, stepping towards the diamond eyes that sealed my fate. I unhooked the gate of the cart but the people stirred and shouted, "Let's get out!" I was kicked in the face and the people panicked and woke the camp. I grabbed Marla, flashed the secret of my face and hid her beneath my robes. The demons went mad and savaged the people. Stabbing at them 20-30 times, noses were bit off and eyes gouged out. I skulked back in the shadows. I looked at the empty road that led into the night. The White Knights had vanished to their freedom. I marched out the next day with a demon army led by King Christian and his pale horse. I was fearful and ashamed to walk with them. Marla was masked and by my side. We had not yet spoken. The wounded soldiers from the English army had been murdered and eaten. And we marched to London. I walked the cold November roads with this nightmarish army. The east of London was ablaze when we arrived. The smoke drifted across the whole sky. It was where they had killed anyone opposed to this new order. A lot of Londoners were dead. This was their burned remains. I briefly saw Christian on his horse. He looked proud at the ruins of the capital, a city his family ruled for generations, now gone. I wondered what possessed a king from a family of great king to rule all Catholic kingdoms to now turn his face from them, from his religion and from his soul. Chapter 7 The Escape. In the night Marla and I escaped the heat and the reek of London. All hope in the government is gone and the people of an England outside London are on their own to struggle and suffer. Colchester was gripped in riots and disorder. Looting was common and the rabble stepped on the murdered police to rob what little they could from shops and homes. Smashing windows. Broken glass washed the streets like rain. We found sanctuary in a church, broken glass at our feet. There we ate out of tins and made sweet hot passionate sex. The firelight of the arson glowed in through the broken windows. We were in love and had come home to each other. She told me of her life in that London town and her hopes and dreams. I told her of how when I was much younger my friends and I would gather at a ruined monastery and dream of the future. Where would our destiny lead to? Then alas, reality set in and the faces of my friends haunted me, for they were probably dead. Their friendship lost from me forever. I kissed her and felt her warm hands on me. There was little solace in it. The pain in my side burned. The wound was red and pulsed. Occasionally it still bled. I hid the wound for Mila and listened as she talked through the night. How she was imprisoned with the people of Dover. Watched them tortured and raped. She would have suffered that fate too, but the army was advancing and she was carted off to be cattle. She cried in my arms and kissed me. Her weight was on my wounds. Agony echoed through me. I kept quiet and held her tight. The next day we fled, leaving the ancient city of Colchester to its fate. I felt like I had abandoned her to ashes. The winding streets were a sorry state as we walked through them. And out. My plan was in the north. I know I have forces there. The only resistance is there. And so be it, we fled into the north. Chapter 8: The White Knight Rises. My faithful pigeon Speckled Jim carried my message of hope to my army, and as I crossed the dismal countryside of England for 3 days I finally saw the answer. Pembroke Castle, the gateway to the north. A fortification from beyond memory, destroyed and remade by the Spaniards in their Catholic invasion of 1688. Look Mila, look at its size. It's so big, she gasped, and people on the walls, they must have got your message. It's all going to work out fine. I love you and everything will be fine. A new hope smiled across her face. The Spanish rebuilt a double-wall fortress on a hillside to rule the conquered English people and burn the heretics among them. This castle is a beacon of the new faith, and the papal Spanish flag flew above it to this day. Below the flagpole is a defensive keep. Inside it is a palace to keep and comfort the European lords of England. Mila, I am head of the White Knights, and as I love you I gave you this castle. When we defend it we will be defending you. I said before I entered her castle. Lee, I can't believe you're alive. Back from the dead. Said Victor, a knight, falling to one knee and parsing, God we thank thee our lords who has returned his chosen one to us. Then turning to his Latin tongue. Suddenly I thought back to the battle. I was wounded and on the floor, then I was freeing some prisoners. I don't remember getting up or leaving the field, or how I survived the devastating battle that killed all my men. Maybe I had been resurrected by the Lord to overturn this unholy invasion and throw down a traitor king. Maybe this is my promised land. General Lee, there are 10,000 White Knights in the castle and 2,000 Scots. The King of Scots knew that with us defeated so rapidly they would turn to him next, especially with his army fighting in Moscow. There is also some rabble from local towns. The local garrison here tried to fight us, claiming they had orders from London, but we were already inside and they died quickly. There 6 of them hung and 6 more gibbeted. We have yet to decide the fate of the final 6 prisoners. The whole of the north is under our control. Reports claim that less than 200 knights have taken to guerrilla tactics and have harassed and slowed the invaders, though I don't believe it, and alas they still progress, climbing up the country like Satan's cock up the leg of a girl to violate her and under his black spell make a witch. Victor said. I asked the men to leave, and I refused a doctor but did ask for a fresh uniform. This castle is well supplied. I looked in a mirror for the first time and felt sickened at the sight of me. My clothes were torn, muddy and blood-stained. I had bad wounds to my forehead and bruised black eyes. I realized that I now hunch over in agony at my side and my hands were cut and scabbed. I tended my wounds with herbs and the remedies I knew. Then with little choice I dressed for battle. I wore chainmail and gauntlets. A white tunic and robe with St. George's breastplate. There was an oval shield for me and a curved sword on it inscribed God wills it. A helm there was also, and a mask. Its face was saintly. When I wore it I stood tall, I was powerful. I felt prouder than the sun and more treacherous than the sea. I the white knight chosen to fight for God's will. I shall drive enemies back to the sea and into the mouth of hell. I met Victor and other knights in the hall, we all waited for the battle and sure of victory we ate lamb and talked with confidence. Save one. A knight Antony spoke. This is our death. Sitting here the devil's army can walk past and burn the north and our dear holy island. We have more options, regroup in France or Scotland, we can gain support as we go. Or we could hold out at the place we hold dear to us, Holy Island. Shut up you fool. We could never cross the North Sea, the Scots king is likely to turn on us and Holy Island, apart from a nice garden has no significant or tactical value. Victor barked silencing the knight. Then the old man spoke, his dying voice slow and cold, we must think ahead. After we beat them at the walls we shall leave the castle and rout them. The heretic Christian will be burned if not killed in the war. Then where will our country be? With this knowledge in mind we can trust no foreign Habsburg, new loyal blood is needed. He coughed and wheezed, the fellow deathly pale. We must elect a king from ourselves. He coughed again more violently than before. Blood spilled from his mouth. His carers took him out of sight in the next room. We heard him scream. He's here, get him away. A short silence later and a carer emerged to tell us the old man moved no more. Victor and the knights now turned to me. I was the hammer to break the old world and forge a new world and a country of our own. The night dragged on. I knew they were coming, I knew they were coming. I could feel it in the stillness of the air and the fear in the silence. In my apartment the girl and I could be together. I grabbed Milo's fair hair and fucked her as hard as I could. I would not lose her again. She bit me in her passion and clawed into me. I went to speak but was interrupted by a shriek of a black feathered crow. The messengers of death gathered. I left her half naked in bed. Pulled the mask over my broken face, looked into her wide green eyes, then turned to the balcony and imagined the fearsome multitude marching. Chapter 9 The Trick of a Witch. The evening was setting in about the valley but a pale winter light still loomed. There were many crows ruffling feathers watching us in our corner of the world. A pale horse trotted into the eyes of the men. A beautiful girl sat upon it. "Hello, hello, help me please," she said in her soft sexy voice, "let me in, I need help." Her green eyes searched the faces of the men watching and murmurs and arguments broke out behind the walls. "Please let me in, I need your help." She smiled then hid behind her eyes. I stood on the battlements and she looked straight at me and scorned. I heard her curse me in my mind. "Well, if I am left out to die in the cold, would one of you want to come and protect little me?" She tried. The arguments behind the gate grew louder and obvious. A fight broke out. Some Scots scaled down the walls and she turned and trotted away slowly. The Scots ran after her and if I did not have Marlowe I would have ran too, but I would not open the gate. Chapter 10 Thy Kingdom Come. One morning not many days later the invaders in the Kingdom of England marched against us. I saw thousands of red flags, the House of Habsburg, the banner of Cornwall and the mercenaries from the Midlands. Thousands of them. The army closed in on us and took a position on the far bank of a stream that cut through the valley, just beyond the reach of our cannon. I could make out some giant cannons, their barrels pointed to the sky. My mouth was dry and the beginnings of a fever descended on me. A single arrow landed within the wall by the vegetable gardens. It said the king will parley with our leader at noon, that leader is I. On what I could only suppose was noon on a dark miserable day plagued by low clouds and a wet mist. I walked out the iron gate and my feet on the dirt mud road I walked towards the small stone bridge on the stream. I was alone and vulnerable but I held my nerve and paced on. A chariot emerged and crossed the bridge. It was tall and pulled by two black horses. The king was tall and in expensive armor, the colors of Habsburg on a sash across his breastplate, gold and precious stones chained round his neck. There were two women with him dressed in warm fur. One held his sword, the other his magnificent diamond scepter. His crown sat tight on his brow. "Looking down now on you, General Lee, I am frightened at what I find," he condescended, You were a favorite of mine, now look at you in this filthy place with no future," he scoffed, then his voice softened. "It's not your fault. I know what poison has possessed you. It's her, that girl as she calls herself. She was my mistress and she would tempt me, do things, betray people, and tell me lies to trick me. She's a witch, Lee. Look closely, the telltales are there. Don't trust her. She has pulled you into breaking law and made you murder, she panicked you into turning on your prince and country. You can be forgiven. Join back with us as things were meant to be." Christian's voice was honest and caring. I could not trust him. I loved Mila, she was mine and she was honest like an angel. I could not stand with this man, for while we stood against him he is no longer a king but a faction leader, a heretic and the messenger of Satan. You are not a king, just a slave to your new master. Satan. You open England's legs to the legion of hell. Insult me and accuse an honest girl of witchcraft. Tear this county apart with war. I fight you because it is God's will you be deposed and this demon army spend these late November days on fire in a ditch, I scorned. Enraged at what he said. I can see with my own eyes your devout beliefs, your devotion to your religion and how easily it could be to fool someone so narrow-minded. Enlighten me to when the Lord informed you of what he wills, he mocked, smiling at his girls, let me your prince and master enlighten you, this is not an army from hell. They are exiles from France, Spain and Holland, dissatisfied with their own narrow-minded governments, who have dragged England to war time and time again for 500 years with no profit, just misery for all involved. There are also mercenaries from North Africa and Egyptus under our red shield false flag. We have controlled them against our dear cousin allies for years now. And don't think the battlefields of Moscow weren't funded against us by our dear allies. Yes, your Christian brothers paid the Golden Hordes. I know you suffered in that campaign. I could not believe what he said, my mind flashed back to the years in Moscow in the winter against terrible winters, dead friends' faces in the snow and the pressure of fear always pushing down so heavy, I remember feeling pity for our allies who fought on some other distant fronts. My faith was all I could cling to, that it was this higher power I fought for, I still believe that today. Then the king continued. What if I told you the King of Heaven never descended in Rome, he never walked through the streets? What if I told you it never happened? I shook my head. I could not believe the blasphemy. It disgusted me. I felt like setting upon him with a blade. But he continued, to unite Europe, Philip of Spain and his Habsburg cousins created a lie that conquered this island, created an empire and kept all the little people like you, Lee, in a deep dark hole. One of the women handed him a glass of red wind. This, Lee, let this be our blood. Come with us and bleed no more. I could no longer think. What did I really know? Suddenly I questioned everything, yet I was resolved to resolve this vile situation, to destroy this enemy. I turned my back on him and walked. We could not turn over. It must end here. Chapter 11. The Sky Falls. I pushed through knights in the court and stamped up the steps in the keep. I wished Ster was here, he could help me. I opened the door to look upon Mila. She stood in the firelight, the glow burned in her eyes. She wore a small white nightgown and her body could be seen through it in the light. She saw how troubled I was and moved closer. I stepped back and round her. When did this all start? I demanded to know. I will tell you, it started the day I met you. Then we turn on people we don't know, just on your word. Then we betray the king and kill our countrymen. All on your word. Why are we here? Why do I listen to your word? I thought you loved me. She reached out. And I jumped back. I looked and I saw. Her fingers were long, unusually long like spiders' legs. Her teeth sharp and her tongue thin. It's strange how you were captured, yet not hurt. You knew that they were men. Not demons. You must have seen, I argued. You were there, she cried, you saw them eat those people. I don't know what I saw, it was dark. You said they did. I don't know what I saw. Until this moment I believed this army ransacked and destroyed towns. But the towns were already in unrest. What do I know? They could have destroyed it themselves. I said. She reached out again. Don't touch me, you witch. I screamed at her. Our eyes met each other in insane spontaneous anger. Then suddenly a tapping at the door. A messenger said their army is advancing and nothing more. I stormed out the room, locking her in behind me. I marched to the tower and looked to the valley. Is our army ready? I asked. Yes, Victor replied, ready for anything. The enemy's long cannons moved forward and pointed to the sky. They each howled a screech of thunder. Seconds later I was on the floor, smoke and ash choked the air around me. I looked over the battlements. The walls were smashed in rubble and brick about the court, the garden burned. I looked in awe. Another barrage and the castle caught fire. The battlements devastated. Screams echoed out from the fog of smoke. Victor, Victor, we can't get behind this. Rally the men and ride out, I told him, panicked. The pain in my side cut into me and the fever boiled my face pink behind the mask. Rally. Rally, rally to me, to ride out. Let's go. For God and God save us. I and the thousands clambers over the shattered stones that were the walls and the twisted iron that was the gate. My fingernails were bloody. We charges out. I drew my curved sword. Screaming into the rain, feet pounding down against the earth, I charged with all my strength. The shells fell. In a flash the ground 100 yards to my left was up in a pillar of black smoke. The men there were gone. Their front line was waiting, not with spears but with new slender muskets. They flashed and rattled, spitting out scores of bullets. It ripped my knights to pieces. We were in amongst the front line, killing people with our swords. Their knives set upon us. Blood, red blood everywhere. The guns riddled the knights with lead. Hundreds were dead in seconds. You're not taking me alive, a knight shouted. The men flailed wildly. I slashed wildly. My body shivered with fever, shivering uncontrollably. My sword fell into the mud. A lance pierced me in the shoulder. It did not hurt, but I found myself on the floor. I scrambled up to feel the agony intensify. I cradled the wound and began to run. Shamelessly I fled. I was cold, deathly cold. All I could see around me was people, they reached out to live. The ground was soft with bodies. I saw Victor's dead face. And Anthony, whose bold idea I spat on, he was on the ground, pieces of him everywhere. I ran in the smoke. Another face, the monk David, his expression was a crunched breathless pain. I had not known he was with us but thought him lost at Canterbury. His neck was open and the red milk freshly painted on the soil. The fight screamed on, pushing further back across the stream and now at the rubble of the walls. Men suffocated in the mud. My curved blade stabbed through the side of a man, he fell with it between his ribs. I abandoned it and clambered on over the rubble and through the war-torn buildings that was less than an hour ago a feared stronghold. My footsteps were on the cobbles of the inner court, I saw a way out. Through the east door and into the hills and countryside, there I could vanish. But I had to look back. Not to the battle or the terror of my comrades but to the keep which still stood tall, thought its outer face charred. I thought of that girl who I loved. I had been so vile to her. I could not forgive myself. I loved her, the only beauty in this world. She was the sun in this oppressed, ill-fated November. In my heart I knew what the bastard said was not true. Myla and I could escape to France. We could leave all this death behind and be free. Free from everything. My fresh love for her overwhelmed all in me. I discarded everything I believed in that instant. All I needed was her. Chapter 12. This is my last resort. The winding steps inside the keep were hard. My fever cut away at my failing strength but I pushed on for her. I was at the door where I last saw her. I walked in the apartment, it was a mess. The chair was smashed on the floor and painting slashed, it was dark and the only light was the fire glow from the bedroom, water was all over the floor and a broken glass, and a thick white powder mixed up with it all. I entered the bedroom and... Jesus Christ, I screamed and cackled a cry, tears streamed from my eyes and nose. My lips curled behind my teeth and my stomach crunched tight. I ran to touch her but fell to my knees hysterical with grief. She lay face down on the bed, one hand hanging off the side and her legs open. Black hair covered her face. She was naked save a ruby slipper hanging loosely from one foot. Her left side bathed in the warm glow. I could not breathe. I gasped and gasped. I reached for her hand but screamed out in my panic. I had seen many, many people dead but not like this, not like this. It was so real and I could not bear it. I rolled on the floor like a helpless child in my agony. I could not stay, I cried but I could not stay. They were coming. I heard the screams and the trembling of the machine guns at the gate. I gasped for air. "I'm sorry," I repeated. I was nothing. My shaking hands gently touched hers and I kissed it. Then I saw her eyes. Horrendous wide brilliant green orbs that burned with intense hatred. They were the eyes of a phantom to torture me in the long sleepless nights. I was aback with fear. Her merciless eyes wished my death and an eternal afterlife of hatred for me. I abandoned her again, shamelessly falling down the stairs. I tried my best to breath. All I had was my bitter life and a scorching fever to burn my soul. I made for the door and into the stream to splash and kick against the freezing torrent, to hide with the beasts in the hills and woods. I was cursed to be an animal. I had no feeling but a numb shivering terror that chattered my broken teeth and knocked my life into a deep black well of crippling remorse. I wanted to stay low in the forgiving waters. One afternoon had cut my life into pieces. Chapter 13 The Angel of Death. The day was dark, the night was dark but I think it was now almost morning. I found refuge in a small cottage whose owners had fled when the Knights ransacked it for food and supplies. I sat in sorrow on an old wooden chair by a deceased fireplace. I heard the wings of crows outside and all was silent. I had no angel to ask for help, I wanted to sleep but a ghost held my heavy eyes open. I wished for an absolution. Needless to say I was in a bad state of affairs. I spoke to myself, muttering but even I could not understand myself. My life is sin and misery. In a broken shard of a mirror I dreamed of the man I was yesterday and looked upon the wretch that looked back. I tried to think of Marla but all I could see was those unforgiving eyes. Time passed in silence. Then footsteps creaked in the cottage. The man walked through the doorway and sat in the chair across the tight room. "You don't look well, Lee, and the grey clouds outside can't help," he said casually but with a stone voice and like his usual voice. "Stu?" I asked. "I thought you were lost at Canterbury, leaving me in the 99 to make some fun badgering that rather impressive army all by ourselves. I'm surprised to see you're still alive actually," he quietly joked. "There was 199, I saved you. I was dressed as one of them." I mumbled in my agony. I could hardly move and my arms curled across my body that was limp in the chair. My clothes were still dank. "Well, we lost a few boys in the pub one night." He smiled. I could not believe he was here, it lifted me. Stu was my best friend. I had worried for him. But now he's safe with me again, together again after all. "I'm surprised to see you're still alive too." I tried to joke. "Actually I'm not," he said coldly and slowly faded into nothingness. My illness took me, I trembled and gave out an awful moan, and it slowed but did not pass. I gasped. Opened my mouth wide for air and hissed it in. I could hear him whispering, "That man I dare not look round to see." I could feel him behind me moving ever closer. A man had come around. A man who held an indifference to all men. I was petrified, gasping and screaming an empty voice. I jerked in the chair. "Go away," I finally managed to speak. But his silent whispers hushed me. His shadow chilled my bones to bitter ice. "Please, please," I mouthed. "I dare not look back." His thin pale arm reached out for me. I dare not look back. I would not look. I could not see him. Of all the things I knew, and all the knowledge and done and all the things I thought I knew or wanted or strived for, they now dissipated into nothing and a single idea punched its way to the front of my mind, an idea stronger than any I had before. Nothing ever mattered save that single idea. I want to live. Then the hand of the man reached out. Finn.